Good evening. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Working Group for the Jobs and Labor budget areas. So glad to be with folks and appreciate your flexibility and a little bit later start time doing this in the evening. We have a couple of items of business. I will note that the conference committee met several times during the regular session, adopted some policies. We were unable to conclude our business within the regular session, and the chairs have been working really hard to present an agreement to working group members regarding a number of issues, and so we're going to be presenting that to members now. The plan is to review the agreement among the chairs and have members discuss and adoption of that. There's one remaining policy provision which we'll discuss. I will note, I'll express my gratitude to the other three chairs and to the two commissioners of DNDLI, and also the other agency heads as well, Explore Minnesota and others that we oversee, for their collaborative spirit in working this through. I will say that I think probably speaking for each one of us, there's aspects about the agreement we're going to go through tonight that we would very much want to be different if we were writing the bill on our own. This is the product of compromise and product of a lot of conversations working together to make sure that we have our state two-year budget to pass and be able to keep our state moving forward. I think those are probably the general remarks I'll make, probably a little bit more, but I'm going to turn to the other chairs for anything they wish to say. When we get to I'm thinking commissioners, and when we get to the budgets for those areas, we'll have the commissioners up and certainly invite you if there's something you want to say. And we've got Commissioner Blissenbach here. I know Commissioner Verlick is not able to join us, but I believe Devin. Joining us virtually. Okay, excellent. So glad to have him. I will turn then to Chair Champion and then to Chairs Baker and McEwen. Chair Champion, anything you wish to say, sir?
Thank you so much, Chair Pinto, and thank you to all the others who worked so feverishly in order for us to come to some agreement. I'd like to underscore and echo what Chair Pinto said, is that there are provisions that some that are not here from the Senate side that we really wanted really bad, but we could not get agreement on those things, and we were mature about the fact if we couldn't, even though we kept trying. And I think at one time I was accused of coming many different ways, asking the same thing over and over again, trying to get certain things done. But at the end of the day, this is the agreement that we've come up with and that we all agreed that we're going to stick by. Again, because we know that there's so many other great projects that we had to leave on the cutting floor, and some, you know, for whatever reason we could not get agreement around. But I think it's a good opportunity, but again, I always wish that there were things that were different, but I'm excited about what we do have. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and turning things to Chair Baker. And I'll maybe just note as I do that, because I meant to say this in my initial remarks, this has never happened in the history of the state before. We've had co-chairs sharing committee. We sort of had a conference committee within the larger conference committee, which slowed things down. I appreciate the patience of the Senate, a number of points in working that through. And so had a lot of complexity in figuring out even taking a House position as things were shifting, and a lot of places where I might have wanted something and my co-chair didn't, and I think vice versa as well. And so that's been a complicated process, but I've been really grateful to the partnership of my co-chair from the House, Chair Baker, and I'll turn to him now. Chair Baker.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair Pinto, and again to the other chairs. It's been a long few weeks here to kind of really get through the details of what we were all sort of really wanting. Number one thing I want to say tonight to everybody is thank you for allowing me to run home last night to get some things done today. I think the later meeting today is because of me, and I just want to say thank you for allowing me to do that. We got accomplished what I had to today, and again, with the holiday weekend coming up, when you're in the hospitality business, you got to make sure that we're ready for certain things. I just want to say thank you for that. And just the process of this. I think it's hard to kind of really understand how difficult this is to get those really hard policy things talked about when you sort of haven't been able to talk about things almost all session. This was a chance to kind of get a lot of that on the table, and again, we were able to work some things out. Certainly, in my opinion, we fell far short of getting some of the goals done that I wanted to get done. But again, out of the spirit of getting the budget done and getting our policy work through that we can agree on, and we're almost there, I want to say the process has been incredible. And I hope that someday we look back on this process to all members, both DFL, House, and everybody, just the complexity of when you have 101 members on one side and 100 on the other. It can't be any tighter, and I just, this was a remarkable feat to get to this point, so we'll keep working, and thank you, Mr. Chair, again, and all, for allowing me to run home real quick. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Chair McEwen.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we're able to come together today for this hearing. Look forward to adoption of all of the hard work that people have been doing these last weeks, and look forward to some good discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, perhaps we will, perhaps the simplest thing is to hear from our commissioners at this point. And then, because that way we can just go through the spreadsheets and move on from there. So we're kind of doing jobs and then labor, so we'll go to Commissioner Varela, who I believe is joining us remotely. And Commissioner, if you are there, please, or it looks like Mr. Boudry is perhaps he is going to be standing in. Mr. Boudry, anything you wish to share on behalf of the Commissioner?
Yes, good evening, members of the working group. My name is Devin Boudry, Government Relations Director at DEED. Commissioner Verelek sends his regrets that he's not able to be here, and he also sends me as a designee, as your fine staff has pointed out. So first off, thank you to the chairs and members of the committee for your diligent work and thoughtful and creative work on this budget. In addition, thank you to all of the partisan and nonpartisan staff for helping to bring ideas to life while also keeping things on track. Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan proposed a reasonable and measured budget this year, which included strategic reductions and narrow targeted investments in key programs. We greatly appreciate the funding for the agency's operating adjustments to help with a variety of expenses, VRS funding to help ensure continuity of services for people with disabilities, the Service to Success initiative, which will help align those finishing public service positions to long-term career pathways, and last, but certainly not least, the Drive for 5 initiative, which trains workers and places them in Minnesota's 5 high-wage, high-demand industries. In addition, we know cuts had to be made this year, but we appreciate the working group for taking due care to ensure that economic development programs maintained enough funding to continue to have a good impact across the state. And we believe the spreadsheet reflects a wide variety of approaches to tackling the economic development and workforce needs across the state. Yet, even while these approaches may be different, I believe all of us share the common goal in creating a Minnesota economy that works for everyone. And with that, I would like to thank you all for a good year, and I think there's a lot to be proud of here.
Thank you for your work, Mr. Boudry, and please pass along our thanks to Commissioner Verelek. And Commissioner Blissenbach, come on up and share your thoughts. Yeah, welcome, please.
Good evening, Chair Pinto and members of the Jobs and Labor Work Group. My name is Nicole Blissenbach, and I'm the Commissioner at the Department of Labor and Industry. I am here to testify in support of the agreement reached on the Jobs and Labor Omnibus. I also want to thank the chairs and the committee members, as well as the partisan and nonpartisan staff for all the work that led to the agreement presented today. The agreement reached includes several of DLI's top budget priorities, including construction codes and licensing fee alignment, misclassification, enforcement and education resources, teacher registered apprenticeship, general fund and workers' compensation operating adjustments, strengthening break laws. While we were disappointed to see the penalties provision not included, we appreciate the work to compromise and find a path to including this proposal. I also want to thank Chair Baker for engaging the department on the proposal brought forward by the well contractors. The resulting agreement on plumbing plan review and inspections of work done by well contractors involved a lot of communication and compromise, ultimately landing in a place all parties could accept. Finally, I want to comment on the item in the policy offer tracking sheet listed as under discussion. I remain ready and willing to work on modifications to the non-compete statute as indicated in the leadership agreement, and I look forward to those continued discussions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll recognize Director Lauren Bennett McGinty as well from here from Explore Minnesota. Thank you for your presence. I think actually, well, I was just going to recognize you, but yeah, it looks like you got something that you'd like to say quickly, Director? Director.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. And of course, I just closed my laptop and therefore it locked, so I won't unlock it right now. But I wanted to say thank you so much for including the governor and lieutenant governor's full budget recommendation for Explore Minnesota. It is coming at a critical time for our industry, and we will continue to do the excellent work we do. I also want to thank all the committee members and the staff for all the work that you've done. I know it has been a very challenging session so far, and I wish you all the best as you move into special session and get this bill going off the floor. So thank you so much.
Thanks for your remarks, and thanks to all the state employees who've been working so hard, and all the agencies. We appreciate your work, and in addition, the many others doing really important work throughout the state in our area. So with that, I think we'll turn to staff to walk us through the jobs spreadsheet. Looks like Ms. Ang from House Fiscal will do that. So please begin.
Mr. Chair and members, Ashley Eng from House Fiscal. I will be walking through the first half of the Jobs and Workforce and Economic Development spreadsheet. This reflects change items only, and so if it's included here, it's a change from base. And if there's no change from base, then it's not included in this spreadsheet. Starting at line 2, the general fund net impact, looking at the biennial totals, the total impact for 26-27 is a reduction of 27 million. And in 28 and 29 is a reduction of 40 million. As well, you can see on line 2, there's a reduction in 24-25. This is a cancellation of 7,100,000. Line 5 includes a reduction for appropriations to the Employment and Economic Development Department of 32,946,000, 26-27, and 44 million in 2028-29. There is a transfer amount totaling 3 million in 26-27 and 3,500,000 in 28-29.
Ms. Egg, I wonder if maybe, I don't know that we'll need every single line with the numbers. I wonder if you could maybe are able to kind of jump to the individual items perhaps, or if just, yeah, I don't know that we'll need every single line with the numbers that we can see, but if that's easier for you to do, you let us know. Yeah, kind of the change, those change items, individual items.
I'll mention on line 23, the total workforce development fund spend is 83,492,000 in 26-27 and 36 million in 28-29. Jumping down, looking at line 29, this reflects the leadership agreement and the jobs target of a reduction of 30 million in 26-27 and a reduction of 40 million in 28-29. Additionally, the target included a $3 million appropriation to lead lines and a shift from base spending from the general fund to the workforce development fund of 25 million each biennium, and the chair's agreement reflects these targets. Looking down to the line items, on line 51, there's $1 million in 26-27 to child care worker support. And this is to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. On line, in the Business and Community Development Division, on line 81 and 82, there is a availability extension of 5 million in fiscal year 25, and then a reduction in 28-29 of 2 million for the biennium. On line 83, there is a reduction in 28-29 of 1.5 million. On line 86, there's a reduction of 329,000, 26-27 from the Host Community Economic Development Program. On line 91, there's a reduction in 26-27 of 6,991,000 and 4,800,000 in 28-29 from the Job Creation Fund. On line 96, there's a reduction of 2 million each biennium from the redevelopment grant program. And on line 97, this was moved to the transfer section, so I'll discuss it later. On line 101, this was moved to the transfer section, so I'll discuss it later. On page 3, in 102 and 103, there is an extension of availability in the fiscal year 25 appropriation, and then a reduction of $500,000 each biennium from the Cannabis Navigate grants. On line 104 and 105, there is an availability extension in fiscal year 25 for Launch Minnesota. On line 109, there is $1 million in fiscal year 26-27 to MNSBIR. On line 110, there's a cancellation of $1 million in fiscal year 25 from the Expanding Opportunity Fund. On line 115, there is $5,523,000 in fiscal year 26-27 and $2,804,000 in 28-29 towards the Promise Act grants. On line 135, there is $1 million in fiscal year 26-27 to the Neighborhood Development Center. On line 146, there is $627,000 in fiscal year 26 to Community and Economic Development Associates. On line 149, there is $200,000 in fiscal year 26 towards the African Development Center. On line 162, there is $500,000 in fiscal years 26-27 towards Enterprise Minnesota for their small business growth acceleration. And on line 163, there's $500,000 in fiscal year 26-27 towards Made in Minnesota, a part of Enterprise Minnesota. On line 169, there's a $3,500,000 cancellation in fiscal year 25. On line 185, there is $500,000 in fiscal year 26-27 to Coalition of Asian American Leaders. On line 189, there's the cancellation of $200,000 from the butchery shop relocation. On line 192 and 193, there is an availability extension of $10 million towards the Minneapolis Lake Street business support. On line 198, there's $500,000 fiscal year 26-27 to the Latino Economic Development Center. On line 199, there's $300,000 in fiscal year 26-27 to Issaroon. And looking down at line 205, this is from the Workforce Development Fund. There's $500,000 in fiscal year 26-27 towards Women Venture for their child care support for efforts. Continuing on, looking at the transfers section now, this is line 211 through 213. This is a new way of funding these programs, so this would be the base amount. So the base funding for on line 212 for the Emerging Entrepreneur Loan Program is $1 million each biennium. And the base funding for the Cannabis Startup Grants is $2 million in 26-27 and $2,500,000 in 28-29. Jumping down to the Employment and Training Programs division of DEED. On line 224, there is a reduction from base of $1 million each biennium for the Rural Career Counseling Coordinators. On line 226 and 227, there is an availability extension for Drive for 5. On line 231, there is a reduction from base for the Pathways Prosperity Program of $2,858,000 in 26-27. On line 237, there's a cancellation in fiscal year 25 of $1,200,000, and then a reduction completely of the base funding in each biennium of $2,550,000 from the Targeted Population Workforce Program. On 244 and 245, there's an availability extension for the cannabis training grants in fiscal year 25, as well as a $3,500,000 reduction in 26-27, and a $2,500,000 reduction in 28-29. On line 260, there is $500,000 on fiscal year 26-27 to COPAL. On line 264, there is $900,000 in 26-27 to MDI. Jumping down, there on line 304, there is $500,000 in 26-27 to Al Ma'un. And that concludes the general fund portion of this division, and I'll let Hannah take over. Ms. Mulder.
Ms. Noodler, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Hannah Grunwald-Nollner, it's a long, hard name, understandable.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Fiscal staff on the Senate Jobs Committee. I'll pick up on line 324. These are the beginning of Workforce Development Fund appropriations under the Employment and Training Program Division of DEED. So for Service Success Initiative, this is $2 million in fiscal year 26-27 and $1 million in fiscal year 28-29. Going to the next page, page 5. This entire page are all one-time funding from the Workforce Development Fund. So in fiscal year 26-27, so I'll just say the name of what's being funded and the amount in the biennium. So on line 327 for support services, 1.5 million. Pathways to Prosperity, 6.858 million. Part of this is the reduction that Ms. Ng mentioned earlier, which is part of the shift from the general fund to the Workforce Development Fund base funding. So that was, I believe, 2.858 million, and then this is that plus an increase of 4 million in additional funding. On line 330, Youth at Work, 2 million. Minnesota Diversified Industries Career Skills, that was taken out. On line 336 for Ujama Place, 800,000. Hired, 800,000. American Indian Communities OIC, 1 million. Father Project Goodwill Easter Seals, 1.5 million. Big Brothers Big Sisters, 500,000. Minnesota Grocers Association, 500,000. Hospitality Minnesota Pro Start, 500,000. Clues, 1.75 million. Twin Cities Rise, 1.4 million. Workforce Development Inc., 550,000. Project for Pride and Living, 750,000. Pillsbury United Communities, 250,000. International Institute, 1 million. Minnesota Resiliency Partnership, 350,000. Emerge Community Development, 450,000. Workforce Development Inc. Bridges to Healthcare, 750,000. Propel Nonprofits, 1 million. Summit Academy OIC, 1.5 million. Better Futures, 500,000. 30,000 Feet, 250,000. Jumping down to line 369, Boulder Options Youth Mentoring Program, 500,000. North Minneapolis Change Starts with Community, 1 million. Inspire MSP, 150,000. Jobs Foundation, 250,000. City of Brooklyn Park Workforce Development Programming, 500,000. Going down to line 392, YMCA of the North, 400,000. Twin Cities Urban League, 400,000. Now on page 6, lines 400 and 401 represent an extension of the appropriation for Arrowhead Economic Opportunity Agency. On line 403, Drive for 5 Workforce Fund, 12 million. Abijah's on the backside, 400,000. Going down to line 407, Black Women's Wealth Alliance, 500,000. Or excuse me, yes, that's right. Mistaken myself. Line 408, Aspirus Lakeview Hospital, 42,000. West Broadway Business and Area Coalition, 250,000. Sana Foundation, 1 million. Alliance of Boys and Girls Clubs, 1 million. Mind the Gap, 750,000. Going down to line 415, Minnesota STEM Ecosystem, 1.5 million. Minnesota Association of Black Lawyers, 500,000. Going down to line 420, Rural Cancer Institute, 500,000. Line 424, Cairo, 100,000. Duluth Promise, 50,000. All Square, 300,000. Comprehensive Review of Department Grant Processes, 150,000. Task Force on Workforce Development Reform, 150,000. On page 7, line 437, there's an operating increase for the General Support Services Division of DEED of 2.274 million in 26-27 and about 3 million in fiscal year 28-29. There's no change to the Minnesota Trade Office. Under vocational rehabilitation services, on line 457, this represents a 22 million shift in fiscal year 26-27 and a 25 million shift in 28-29 from the general fund to the workforce development fund for the voc rehab program. So you'll see that shift happening on lines 457 to 467. And I'll just mention, since we're looking at line 467, that in addition to that shift, there's 10 million in additional funding in fiscal year 26-27 and in the tails for vocational rehab. So now going back up to line 458, extended employment services, reduction of $1 million a year ongoing. Line 459 for employee support for persons with mental illness, there's a $1 million increase to the program ongoing each year. And the amount in fiscal year 2025 of 1.2 million is representing an extension that exists under current session law, and the chair's position in front of us directs deed to split that existing extension equally between fiscal year 26-27. So that shows up on line 460 of $600,000 a year for employee support for persons with mental illness. There's no change to state services for the blind or the other category. So flipping to the last page, Explore Minnesota Tourism, total change here of $6 million in the general fund in fiscal year 26-27 and $502,000 in fiscal year 28-29. First change item on line 494, an operating increase of $375,000 in fiscal year 26-27 and $502,000 in fiscal year 28-29. On line 506 for the 2026 Special Olympics U.S. Games, $671,000 in fiscal year 2026. On line 510 for the World Junior Hockey Championships, $5 million in fiscal year 2026. And then jumping down to line 521, this is $3 million for lead service line replacement grants from the Public Facilities Authority. Beginning on line 533, this just represents revenue in fiscal year 2026, which is essentially the cancellations in fiscal year 2025 being carried forward into fiscal year 2026. And I'll just mention the footnote on lines 538 to 539. In the policy provisions, as council will walk through, there is a UI benefit cost increase paid out of the UI trust fund by $14.97 million in fiscal year 2026. And there's more information on that fiscal note in that footnote. So members, I'll stop there if there are any questions for me or missing.
And just to process check, members, my plan would be to discuss and adopt this spreadsheet, then discuss and adopt the labor side spreadsheet, and then go to the policy provisions. Obviously, if folks have objections, let me know. We'll see if there are questions or comments at this time, and otherwise we will adopt the spreadsheet. And I am not seeing any, looking to see. And I guess maybe we'll have a motion then to adopt your champion, if you are willing to do that.
That's my motion.
Okay. Members, any discussion to the motion? We already had that. All in favor of the motion to adopt this job spreadsheet, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Turning to their House fiscal staff, you could please walk us through the labor side spreadsheet. Not sure who's doing that first. Yes, and Ms. Birch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And members. My name is Megan Birch, and I'm the fiscal analyst supporting the Senate Labor Committee. In your packets, you should have another spreadsheet titled Labor Committee Senate File 1832 Workgroup Agreement, Labor Articles, in the upper left-hand corner. And this spreadsheet documents the appropriations agreed to by the chairs for the agencies in the Labor Committee jurisdiction, as well as the fiscal impacts of agreed-upon policy items for those that have them. I'll also note that the job spreadsheet review, the spreadsheet was change items only, and the labor spreadsheet is the full budget. But I'll be focusing on columns I, M, and Q, which summarize the change in biennial expenses and revenues in the agreement from the base set by the February forecast. So if you're looking for change items, those are the columns to reference. Lines 1 through 45 of the spreadsheet show a summary of expenses and new revenues by fund for each agency. I think the biggest takeaway here is that the total change in general fund expenditures on line 3 and general fund revenues on line 8 net to the global targets for labor of $2 million in fiscal years 25 through 27 and $1.2 million in fiscal years 28 and 29. And that's reflected on the top right of the page. So I'll move to a review of the change items that contribute to those fund level impacts, starting on line 48 with the Department of Labor and Industry. On line 53, there's a $1,050,000 increase in the 26-27 biennium and an $876,000 increase in the 28-29 biennium from the General Fund for Labor Standards Division operating. And this includes both an operating adjustment and the consolidation of the appropriation rider for private sector personnel records, information, and education on the second page on line 60. On line 58, there's a $567,000 increase in the 26-27 biennium and a $572,000 increase in the 28-29 biennium from the General Fund for Worker Misclassification Enforcement, Education, and Training. This increased enforcement work corresponds to an increase in General Fund revenue of $90,000 per year starting in fiscal year 2027, which is reflected down on line 133 on page 3. On lines 62 and 63, $25,000 of the fiscal year 24 appropriation from the General Fund for the Veterans Benefits and Services poster is canceled in fiscal year 25 and carried forward as a revenue in fiscal year 26 on line 126. On line 66, there's a $620,000 one-time general fund appropriation in the 26-27 biennium for a misclassification fraud impact report. On line 71, there's an operating adjustment for the Workers' Compensation Division of $4,078,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $4,388,000 in the 28-29 biennium from the Workers' Compensation Fund. On line 92, there's a $26,000 per biennium increase in the Workforce Development Fund for helmets to hard hats. On line 93, there's a $7 million one-time Workforce Development Fund appropriation in the 26-27 biennium for a statewide registered teacher apprenticeship program. On lines 96 and 97, $1 million of the fiscal year 24 appropriation from the Workforce Development Fund for the Clean Economy Apprenticeship Program is canceled in fiscal year 25 and carried forward as a revenue in fiscal year 26 on line 129. On line 98, there's a $500,000 one-time Workforce Development Fund appropriation in fiscal year 26 for the Virtual Academy Career Pathways Program with Operating Engineers Local 49. On line 99, there's an $800,000 one-time Workforce Development Fund appropriation in the 26-27 biennium for Building Strong Communities Apprenticeship Readiness Programming. On line 105, there's a $1 million one-time Workforce Development Fund appropriation in the 26-27 biennium for construction industry mental health initiatives. On lines 107 and 108, the authority for the $225,000 one-time general fund appropriation for the single egress stairway apartment building report in fiscal year 25 is extended for one additional fiscal year through fiscal year 26. And on line 111, there is a $4,164,000 increase in the 26-27 biennium and a $4,292,000 increase in the 28-29 biennium in the statutory appropriation for the construction code fund. And that corresponds to estimated construction code fund revenue increases on line 132 of $25,493,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $25,602,000 in the 28-29 biennium. And those are the result of a construction codes and licensing division fee adjustment that's included in the policy agreement. Flipping to page 3 and moving on to the Workers' Compensation Court of Appeals on line 117. There's a workers' compensation fund operating adjustment of $731,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $664,000 in the 28-29 biennium. And finally, the Bureau of Mediation Services on line 119. There's a general fund operating adjustment of $160,000 in the 26-27 biennium and $214,000 in the 28-29 biennium. And that includes increases for the Public Employment Relations Board on line 121 of $32,000 in the first biennium and $42,000 in the second. I've already mentioned all of these revenues kind of as I've gone through. So that concludes my review of the labor spreadsheet, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for doing that, and to all of our nonpartisan staff for your work. We're really grateful. Members, questions, comments about the labor spreadsheet? Not seeing any. Mr. Chair, pardon me. I was going to actually ask Chair McEwen to make the motion. So Chair McEwen, if you would like to move approval of the spreadsheet of the budget.
Thank you very much. That is my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Members, any discussion of the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor of approval of the labor spreadsheet as walked through by staff, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes, and we have 2 adopted spreadsheets. Thank you, members. Then we're turning to a document that has a chart that has working area, I think, in the upper left corner. And Ms. Shalene, you can walk us through this. I believe these are policy provisions that were either adopted in the public meetings here or else the subject by chair's agreement that we're now presenting to members. Ms. Shalene.
Chair and members, Anna Shalene, House Research. We are working from the working group policy agreement tracking sheet. All items looks like this. We'll be beginning with the agreed items and describing each item, and beginning in the deed area briefly, along with the agreement. So the first item is changes to the BDPI program to clarify plant processing's inclusion. In this case, we agreed to the House language, the exclusion of that. Next item is technical changes to the expanding opportunity account. The working group adopted the House language with a correction suggested by the agency. Next item, the federal fund. There was a removal of the federal matching language. This was adopted by the working group, or the conference committee at the time. Next item allows the committee to designate someone to appear on the Job Skills Partnership Board. This was adopted by the conference committee, the House position. Next item is the Youth at Work program. It expands to include pre-employment and mentorship services. There was a chair's agreement to the House language. Next, the Pathways and Partnership programs were made some changes to those. There was a chair's agreement to the Senate language. Next item, all degrees count for workforce outcomes. This was adopted. It was the same item. The emerging entrepreneur account made some technical changes to that. The conference committee adopted the Senate language. Next section is clarification to the reporting of parking revenue. The conference committee adopted the same item. The community wealth building program, there were changes made to allow smaller loan accounts. The conference committee adopted the Senate's language. The next one is a technical changes to the Expanding Opportunity and Promise Act grant language from 2023. The conference committee adopted the Senate language. Next is an extension to the 2023 appropriation to the Forward Fund. Conference committee adopted the Senate language. Next, there's an extension to grants to Ramsey County and Youth Prize, and the substitution, and the removal of Kajok from a 2023 appropriation. The conference committee adopted the House language. Next is an extension to a grant to the city of Minneapolis in 2023. The conference committee adopted the House language. Next, extension of the Arrowhead Opportunity appropriation from 2024 and there was with the A112 amendment, agreement to the House language with that amendment. Next, the There was an extension to a 2024 appropriation for Somali festivals and a substitution of the Minnesota Humanities Center for Kajok. This was adopted with that substitution, the House language, by the conference committee. Next, there were changes to the Change Starts with Community grant. There was chair's agreement to the Senate language. For a 2023 grant for online hospitality training, there was a removal of outcome reporting requirements. The conference committee adopted the Senate language. We renamed a program for Enterprise Minnesota to be the Made in Minnesota program. The conference committee adopted the Senate language. There was a repeal of 2 mandatory reports. The conference committee adopted the House language on that. There were a number of sections changing Explore Minnesota's mission language. The conference committee adopted the same language, it was the same in both bills. And finally, before we move on, there were changes to the CAN startup program. There was adoption of the Senate language by the conference committee, along with the removal of a change at lines 89.15 and 16, I believe, striking the new language and reinstating the prior language. We'll now move to Ms. Doyle-Fontaine. We'll continue from here.
Ms. Doyle-Fontaine.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And following from Ms. Charlene, I am Carlin Fontaine, Senate Counsel. So we will start with the Promise Act changes. There are administrative changes. The conference committee adopted the Senate language. The next item is the Workforce Development County Labor Force Participation rate would be included in some reporting requirements. The Senate language was adopted by the conference committee. Next is some changes, some technical changes regarding the terms used for blind vending facilities. The conference committee, that was a same provision, and that was adopted by the conference committee. The next item is the unemployment misrepresentation penalty increases. That was agreed to by the working group in the Senate position. The next item is the additional unemployment for minors, and this was agreed to by the working group to the Senate language. The next item is the Governor's Workforce Development Board membership changes. This was a governor's request. There is an 824 amendment in your packet. And as I go through any of these amendments, if anyone has questions, please let us know. This was agreed upon by the working group. Turning the page, the next item is for the CAN Train grants. This was a governor's request, a Department of Employment and Economic request to remove the grants to individuals because it was not easy to administer these particular grants to individuals. Instead, they'll go to organizations exclusively. There is an amendment in your packet, which is the A26, and this was adopted by the conference committee. There was also in your packet, and this was also a request. The next item is some funding extensions that DEED requested. This is the A27 that's in your packet, and this was adopted by the conference committee as well. The next item is the leadership ask for this conference committee and working group. It is for the paid leave maximum, the rate decrease in the premium amount for the paid leave premium, and this is reflected in the A28, which is in your packet. The next item is the Task Force on Workforce Development System Reform. This was a House request. There's an A38 in your packet. This was agreed upon by the working group. The next item also has an amendment. This was a Senate initiative. It's a uniform outcome report card changes. So it's some changes to a underlying statute. It initially appeared in the Senate language. It would have applied only to the named grantees, but now it's being incorporated into the underlying statute. There's a A129 in your packet, and this was agreed upon by the working group. We will move on now to the Department of Labor and Industry for the labor provisions. This next provision is for some Department of Labor and Industry Enforcement Authority. This was adopted by the conference committee. The next provision is for nursing home definitions for the Nursing Home Workforce Board. This was also adopted by the conference committee, these definitions. The next item is a technical change to an accrediting body, correcting that name. This was adopted by the conference committee. The next provision is for manufactured housing technical changes and fees. There is included in your packet an A34. Additional work was done on the manufactured housing provisions, and this is reflected in the A34. I also wanted to point out that as part of this agreement by the working group, that the sections listed on the second column to the end on the right, these sections 2 to 6, 23 to 26, 28 to 32, and 44 to 46 will be incorporated in the document that is being prepared by the revisor. The next item are the construction code and licensing fee increases. These were previously discussed and adopted by the conference committee. Similarly, the class 4 electrical systems were also adopted these provisions were adopted by the conference committee. The next item is the well contractor regulation. There is an A31 amendment in your packet. This language I won't go into it, it's detailed involving the Department of Health and how this will be regulated and communicated between the Department of Labor and Industry and the Department of Health. The next amendment, or the next item, is for the rest and meal break clarifications and then the remedies. And you will see there's included an A126 in your packet, which, as Commissioner Blissenbach mentioned, it has some clarifying language, but then also does remove the penalties from those provisions. This amendment, then it would be incorporated into sections 1 to 5 from the side-by-side. The next item is the misclassification report. This was discussed in the conference committee, and then some additional discussions happened by the working group. It was agreed upon that it would go into statute, and that is reflected, it'd be codified in Chapter 181. You'll see the A131 does that. It is basically, it's all of the underlying language from the House position, and it includes also a 6-year period where the Department of Labor and Industry would come back and request funding, and if it's funded, they would do a report. And you'll see that reflected in the A131. I'm going to move on now to the undecided item, which will be discussed later in this meeting, which regards the allowing some covenants not to compete, and that's under discussion. I can quickly go through the items that were not included. No? Okay, I do not have to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think unless folks have questions, I'm thinking not. Members, we did not have the A131 in our packets and not distributed to the public previously. Copies have been distributed up front. It's being posted, and perhaps it has in fact been posted, so available online. I believe the copies are being distributed as well. The A131 is related to the misclassification report, and it simply codifies language that was in the House bill and then extends the report time frame to every 6 years rather than every 4, is what the substance of that amendment does. And I understand, Micheline, that in addition, the A34 manufactured housing, there's a technical fix of some kind. If you could just describe that, Micheline.
Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Drahan.
Thank you. Wondering if we could just go through the list and have council just go through every amendment just briefly.
Certainly.
Very brief.
Of course, Senator. Yeah,
real quick.
What each one does, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. What I might note is the ones that are listed here that say adopted, we had already adopted. I think most of the amendments relate to ones that had not been adopted yet. Yeah, let's go through each one. Maybe the order that I'm seeing just going in the sheet would go to the A112, I believe, is the first amendment in order on this sheet. Ms. Shalene, which is relating to the Arrowhead opportunity, or maybe Ms. Doyle-Fontaine. Oh. Okay, so the hundreds column, I'm going to the Senate. Ms. Doyle-Fontaine, if you can tell us about the A112.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members. So the A112, this would actually be an amendment to the riders, if I'm correct. And what it does is there were some concerns in the Senate that this would have turned this into a capital improvement. So what it does then is creates a revolving fund for rehabilitating tax forfeited properties for workforce housing. And then it creates, and it would still be work done by the Arrowhead Economic Opportunity Agency, but it just is not worded as a capital improvement. And it instead would be for this work and for this purpose. And then it has some reporting requirements about the number of homes and that kind of detail. And then it talks about the availability and that it's a one-time appropriation. So I'm not sure if that need further detail on that.
Thank you so much for that. I believe the next amendment that I am seeing is the A24. And so, Ms. Shalene, that relates to Governor's Workforce Development Board membership changes. Ms. Shalene.
Chair and members, yes, the A24 makes some changes to the Governor's Workforce Development Board at the recommendation of DEED. We have the largest board in the country, and this removes some of the members, moves the executive director of the Association of Workforce Boards, that's the local workforce development areas, up to being a voting member, and makes some other changes. If you have further questions, you might want to call on the agency to comment.
Okay, thank you. Moving to the A26 and A27, those were both previously adopted, so I'm inclined to move past them since we'd already agreed to them. Then the A28 is the next one that is part of the leadership deal. Ms. Shalene, the A28.
Yes, Chair and members, this is for the paid family medical leave program. The leadership global deal required that the maximum annual premium rate for the program be reduced from 1.2% of taxable wages paid to each employee to 1.1% of taxable wages.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next line is the A38. And Ms. Shalene, we'll call on you for that one as well.
Chair and members, yes, the A38, this includes rider language for a comprehensive review that the Department of Employment and Economic Development will do of their programs and competitive grant processes, as well, that will result in both a preliminary report next February and a final report in January 2027 to the legislature with recommendations for changes. In addition, it includes language for the Task Force on Workforce Development System Reform and an appropriation for that as well. This would be a task force that will have a membership that includes the Commissioner of DEED, then 4 legislators chosen by the caucuses in the House and the Senate, and then 4 members of the Governor's Workforce Development Board who are also represent local workforce development boards from communities around the state. The task force will meet and examine, how the state forms strategies, sets goals, and allocates funds to meet Minnesota's workforce development needs, including a review of programs, funding mechanisms, and evaluation metrics. This would include both state and federal programs at all agencies. There are a number of duties described, and there will be a preliminary report again in next February and a final report in January of 2027. The task force expires after 2 years.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, as these are moving along, as folks have questions about individual ones, please contact me and then to be called upon. But otherwise, we'll move to the A129, which I believe is on the Senate side. Ms. Doyle-Fontaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at the A129, the first part of the amendment gets rid of a definition that is in the repealed report, definition of net analysis. And then the remainder of the amendment is making some changes to this uniform outcome report card that's done by the Commissioner of Employment and Economic Development. First of all, it turns it into an annual report instead of a biennial report. That's in 1.7 to 1.12 of the amendment. And then we, on the second page of the amendment, it adds some language for individually specified grantees and grant recipients from the programs it requires them, those recipients, to supply some information, and this is the information that was included in the Senate position. So you'll see lines 211 to 220, the information they need to provide, and this needs to be given to the commissioner by October 1 each year until all of the grant funds have been spent or canceled under that grant. So you'll see it's the purpose of the grant, amount of the grant awarded, previous grants awarded by the commissioner, some geographic data on anyone who's receiving grant funds that are not Minnesota residents, and then some charitable giving ratio for the, if available, on their Form 990. And then on the third page, you'll see as a condition of receiving the grants that a grantee has to agree to provide the information. And finally, on the third page, there are, on the limitations on future appropriations, it specifies program grantees or direct appropriation grant recipients. Previously, under this report, it really just focused on the program itself that was being administered by DEED. I changed there's some dates changed in there to update that from 2014. And then there's also a provision on lines 3.8 to 3.9 that would allow the commissioner to withhold grant disbursements from a grantee if the reporting requirements are not met. And then I think I've explained the rest of it, but that is the gist of it. It's kind of codifying some of the requirements that we had in the Senate language. And if you have any questions about this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Ms. Shalene, I believe, for the A34, which is the manufactured housing technical changes and fees.
Chair and members, yes. So this amendment does a number of changes. There were originally in the bill, in the Senate bill, a great deal more changes to the manufactured housing provisions. There were ongoing negotiations between the department and various representatives of industries that resulted in deleting some of those sections from the bill, making some technical changes, some of the others to meet the needs of the advocates. And the resulting language is the sections that we adopted, as well as this amendment. I think if you have further questions than that, probably best to call on the agency.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the A31, Ms. Shalene, well contractor regulation.
Chair and members, yes, the A31 represents an agreement between the Minnesota Department of Health, the Department of Labor and Industry regarding how well contractors and limited well drillers will be regulated. There was a disagreement about who had jurisdiction over this work. And the amendment lays out a number of provisions that will determine how that happens in the future. Again, calling on the agency to go into the technical details of that if necessary would be recommended.
Okay, thank you. And then moving to Ms. Doyle-Fontaine for the rest and meal breaks, the A126.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the A126, the takeaways from this are that the effective date for the changes to the break laws will be effective January 1, 2026. And then if you engrossed it, you would see that the remedies are being removed. There are some more from both the rest and the meal break sections. And then there are some other wording changes that make some comfort language surrounding the rest and meal breaks. So that's what's included on this amendment.
Okay, thank you. And then the A131 I had described previously, but should probably have the expert confirm. Ms. Doyle-Fontaine.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As I went through this a little bit before, this is virtually the same language as was in the side-by-side from the House. As I mentioned, it is now being codified because it was probably a good idea since they're going to be doing the report again in 6 years if they have funding. But that's basically the language. It is now in the same section where the partnership statute for the misclassification is housed, so it makes good sense for it to be there. And that is this amendment. Thank you.
Chair?
Senator Draheim, yeah, that was a good suggestion.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and I show two more amendments, unless I missed them, the A117 and the A118.
And I may have missed those if,
I didn't see them on the spreadsheet, but on the A131, on lines, starting on 1.13, we had some discussion about the independent third party for that study. And I had made a suggestion that we support our higher ed institutions and request that they use one of our colleges with wonderful people in them. So that's just a suggestion for you chairs. I still think it's the right thing to do. It would help out our higher ed institutions. They're very capable. So just food for thought on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, it occurs to me, I suppose, that our higher education, some higher education folks would probably qualify as external experts. So it would fall right in the language that we have. So, but a good thought, and we'll have folks note that. Yeah, Senator, Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I maybe want to ask DLI. My understanding is there's not a lot of people who do this work. And so probably to get the most cost-effective and valuable person who can estimate out this estimates that we have spent 14 months in the task force. The OLA said that they couldn't measure it. So my guess is that there's only a few people in the country who can do this. So I think this would be really limiting.
Yeah, I don't know that we need testimony, Commissioner, unless somebody feels that they do. But yeah, I appreciate it. Senator Draheim, thank you so much for the suggestion. I know DLI is paying attention to it, and it sounds like the term external experts will cover what you're looking for. And certainly, if anybody wants to have Representative Greenman, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't hear a motion, but I would just say that I oppose the motion if there is one.
I do not, no, I don't think there is a motion. The term external experts is in the amendment that we already have, so I think we're all good. Any other questions? Oh, Senator Verbatim, I'm sorry. Please, calling on you if do you want to be? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to get clarification, and maybe Senator Draheim can speak to this. Is the intention just to limit to experts and third parties located in this state?
And who is the question directed to Senator Draheim? Yeah, Senator Draheim.
Thank you, members. Yeah, I think that was my amendment, the A118. And, I think, during COVID, the governor's office asked the U of M to a bunch of modeling and studying on a various number of topics. I have the utmost respect for the U and Min State both. I just think it should be considered. I don't think we do a great job of using our colleges and universities that we have here in the state. And I would even be okay using a private nonprofit college that we have some great institutions in Minnesota also. It frustrates me when we sometimes go outside of the state to do things, and so that's why I suggested it. And I know there's a lot of chairs here at the table, and I am not one of them. But I just wanted one last ditch effort to try to push for that. Thank you.
And Senator, I may have missed it. So are you in fact making a motion relating to the 118, Senator Draheim? Is this, you provided some input to chairs and commissioner, or what is your, Senator Draheim?
Even if we could modify the A118 to say that they might consider hiring one of our higher education and not mandate that they have to, we need to do a better job of that intersection between our state agencies and our higher ed. You know, I think we have a lot of PhD students out there that are brilliant. And I think it's a shame that we don't use some of our brain power we have in Minnesota.
Well, Senator, we don't have, so I guess I'm just trying to understand, though, are you in fact making a motion? We don't have, I think on the House side, we don't have a 118. Is this just a comment, which is just fine? Or you sort of, what's the, at least I did not have a copy. Senator Draheim, are you in fact moving an amendment?
Sure, I'll move the A118. It was in my packet, so I just assumed everybody had it. I'm sorry, Chair.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so Senator Draheim is moving the 118. Let's make sure we get copies to folks then.
And I also have a A117, and I don't know if that
We don't have that one either.
So those would be two.
Okay.
And maybe staff can talk about that one also.
My apologies. As you were talking, I just thought it was a comment. I didn't realize that you had. You were talking about something specific, make a motion. Okay. Well, in that case,
Chair.
we probably then should have, I'm sorry, Commissioner, we probably should have you come up and just provide your thoughts on the 118, and then we can move on. Commissioner Blissenbach, comments on the 118.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. Nicole Blissenbach, Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. I definitely appreciate the sentiment. We will use an RFP when we put this report out to see who has an interest. I can share that we are currently using the University of Minnesota for a work comp PTSD study that we were assigned last year that came through on the Work Comp Advisory Council bill. We love working with the University of Minnesota. I hope they do put their interest in the RFP, but I do think that this amendment would limit our ability if there was not an interested party in the state of Minnesota who was interested in working on this.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to note, if this, I don't know if the A118 has been posted online, but if not, I want to make sure that it would be posted right away so that members of the public would be able to have that as well. Thank you, Commissioner Blissenbach. We should probably move to vote pretty quick, but anything else anyone wishes to say? Senator Umer Verbaden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would just agree that I wouldn't want this to be limited. I know Representative Greenman and I have spent a lot of time in the task force trying to understand this issue and hear from experts, and we're really trying to get a good grasp of how much this form of fraud costs our state and taxpayers, and I want to make sure that the department has all the potential tools that they can use for this, and we may be limited to, if we adopt this language, we may be limited in getting the information that we need to conclude the report.
Okay, thank you. Senator Graham, any final comment before we go to the motion? Before we will go to the vote? Okay, thank you. So, Chair Baker.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I guess, thank you, Senator Graham, for bringing this forward. I guess maybe I don't know if this is to the department. I'm just kind of curious, though, how the last third-party vendor was actually selected, and was there an RFP? Was it sort of like, who makes that up? I'm just kind of wondering how that was maybe done, and I don't really know who that is. Maybe that's a commissioner question.
Commissioner, come on back up. Please, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. When we put out an RFP, we indicate what the parameters of what we're looking for are. Here it is outlined in the language that will go in the statute as to what this study would require as part of it. And so people respond to that, put in what they would do in response to what we're expecting and what those deliverables are. And we go through and then we score the proposals that are received and have a whole review committee that does that and make sure that we're selecting the best proposal that meets the deliverables that we've identified at a cost that we can afford.
Thank you, Chair Baker.
Yeah, just maybe in one follow-up, Commissioner, and again, I like the idea of it. I don't know where we'll actually take it tonight, but has it ever been considered before to use a higher education as a possible vendor for something like this? I think it's actually a pretty noble idea.
Commissioner, and I would say the language in our bill would not prohibit that at all, but Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair Pinto and Chair Baker for the question. Absolutely, I think this is the type of study where a labor economist makes the most sense, because that is what we would be looking at in coming up with the conclusions in the report.
Thank you.
Okay. Chair McEwen.
Thanks for the discussion. As the chair of the Senate Labor Committee and listening to this debate, I appreciate also the desire to want to have our public universities do this work when we can, but I also am very sympathetic to the need to keep the process competitive and to make sure that the options are on the table for the department to get who we need to do the study effectively. So hopefully that will be the university. We'll see how it goes. And I'm going to ask people to not support this amendment, though, for this time being. And Mr. Chair, I'd ask for a roll call as well.
Okay. Then there's Senator McEwen, Chair McEwen requests a roll call. There'll be one. I think Senator Graham, you're all done. And so we'll move to the vote. The chair votes no. Oh.
Chair Pinto, no. Chair Baker? Aye. Baker, aye. Representative Greenman?
No.
Greenman, no. Representative Frazier?
No.
Frazier, no. Representative Selesnikar?
Selesnikar, aye.
Selesnikar, aye. Representative Meckland?
Aye.
Meckland, aye. Chair Champion?
No.
Champion, no. Chair McEwen?
No.
McEwen, no. Senator Mohammed? Sorry. Senator Hauschild?
No.
Senator Hauschild, no. Senator Umu Verbaeten?
No.
Umu Verbaeten, no. Senator Draheim?
Yes.
Draheim, aye. And Senator Mohammed?
So having failed to receive support from either majority of the House or majority of the Senate, the motion does fail. And Senator Draheim moving to, I think you would want to move the A117, is that correct? And we do now have it on the House side to your, is that correct, Senator Draheim? And if so, please provide some background on your motion.
I think we could have nonpartisan go through it. It's pretty simple, but.
Okay. Ms. Dorofontaine.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members, this amendment, the 117, would amend the Earned Sick and Safe Time statute, the definition of employee, to exclude an inmate of a correctional facility performing work for the correctional facility while incarcerated. So those individuals would not earn hours of earned safe and sick time for the work that they are doing in a correctional facility and not be considered an employee for that purpose.
Okay, Senator Draheim.
Thank you. Pretty straightforward, and I would request a roll call on this also.
Okay, roll call has been requested. There will be one. Comments, Representative Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Graham, could you tell me what the purpose of this is?
Senator Draheim.
Thank you. Just to exclude inmates. That's it.
That's it. Representative Frazier.
For what reason?
Senator Draheim.
I don't think it's needed.
Representative Frazier.
I'm not clear. I would request a no vote.
Okay. Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was an amendment that we also saw on the House, or excuse me, on the Senate floor when we heard the underlying labor bill and it was rejected. As I understand it, Minnesota law under our Constitution does provide that to some of us, unfortunately, very few rights to incarcerated people. And as I understand it, currently the interpretation from the Department of Corrections is that they do not afford earned sick and safe time rights to incarcerated people. So I do think Representative Frazier's question was quite on point. The question really is why would you add something like this to a statute when these rights already are not being granted or extended or honored? And I think that if we were, so there's one, the sort of futility of an amendment like this is, I think, important to acknowledge. And then also, I do think that if we were going to even consider an amendment like this, I would think it would be appropriate to hear from the Department of Corrections about the work that people who are incarcerated do, so that we would know what we were actually voting on. I'd want to hear from the department and about their policies and how work goes for incarcerated people. So at this point, I don't know what the intent is in this. We just heard our colleague just say that it wasn't necessary, but it's already not happening. So it feels, regardless of what the intent is, it feels cruel, to be frank. It feels unnecessary and just a sort of piling on for people who are incarcerated for no reason. So I strongly oppose this amendment. I did on the Senate floor, and I do now, and I'm glad a roll call has already been requested. Otherwise, I would have requested
It has. I do want to keep moving. I know Senator Verbaden, you had, you want to say something? And I do want to make sure we keep moving, so if you can keep it brief, but please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, serving on both the Labor and Judiciary and Public Safety Committee, I think we could have a robust conversation about the work that incarcerated folks are doing in our facilities and what their status should be. Many of these folks are making as low as 25 cents an hour, but Senator McKeon did a great job of explaining kind of the current status. I don't think this is necessary, and also would have concerns about not having that robust conversation at both committees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Frazier, I'd love to go to Senator Draham to close. You have something real quick, sir?
I just want to remind folks that are paying attention to this that incarceration is the one exemption after slavery was abolished. And so I'm just not clear why you brought this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Frazier. To close, Senator Draham. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair Baker. I'm sorry, I missed you. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Again, we didn't have this conversation on the House floor, and I think it brings up an interesting point. Hadn't thought about this before. Again, if it's not happening now, according to Chair McEwen, why would we be afraid of an amendment like this? And I guess if it's not happening, again, I guess they're employees. I know they make below minimum wage. I know that they do things in the jail and incarceration. I guess I don't know what the Department of Corrections has to say about this. I assume there's nobody here tonight to talk about that and ask the question. Again, I think it's kind of interesting that along with, will they get paid family medical leave? Will they get other benefits like this too? Will they get charged a fee against their hourly rate? Has that been baked in? But I think it just brings up an interesting point that, earn sick and safe, what happens now if they are sick and they can't go to work? Do they get time off? Are they forced to work? Again, I say this because it's a very complex labor world that we are in today. It's not just an easy, simple answer. It's there's full-time, part-time, incarcerated. I don't even think about that stuff. It kind of was over my head. But again, I think it doesn't hurt to talk about this and ask the question. If it's not happening, then what's the problem putting it into law? That'd be my question to the group.
Thank you, sir. Senator Draham to close.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick. So if it's not happening now, what about the next administration? We have repeatedly seen in the 9 years I've been here, every administration or every new commissioner interpret things differently. So I think this is just a common sense, very small clarification. And I hope everybody votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Draham. Yeah, and I'll note ESST is in place right now, and the folks identified here do not receive benefits. And as Representative Frazier said, in fact, it's one part in our Constitution where, in fact, it's slavery prohibited except for folks as part of punishment for a crime. The chair votes no to start the roll call. Ms. Borgening.
Chair Pinto, no. Chair Baker?
Chair, yes. Baker, yes.
Aye. Representative Greenman?
No.
Greenman, no. Representative Frazier?
No.
Frazier, no. Representative Selesnikar?
Aye.
Selesnikar, aye. Representative Meckland?
Aye.
Meckland, aye. Chair Champion?
No.
Champion, no. Chair McEwen?
No.
McEwen, no. Representative Mohammed? Senator Housechild? Senator Housechild, no. Senator Verbaten?
No.
No. And Senator Draheim. Yes. Senator Draheim, yes. And Senator Mohammed.
Having failed to receive the support of either majority of the House or majority of the Senate, the motion fails. So I think I'll ask our nonpartisan staff then to kind of suggest the motion. I believe that it is to adopt, well, Micheline, maybe you can describe what the motion would be, unless there are other discussion, there's more discussion. Oh, there's an A40 amendment. Is somebody advancing the A40? Oh, Chair Baker, please.
I'm sorry, yeah, Mr. Chair is in the middle of something. Are we ready to adopt the policy then?
I believe that we are.
Both labor and deed. Right?
Say this again, Chair Baker.
We're ready to adopt the policies that we kind of adopted here, that were kind of that walkthrough.
Yes, we are ready.
So I just want to make sure it's on the record that if we approve this, my vote is we still have that outstanding issue with non-compete.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that's on the record, that approving this does not park that one just yet.
Absolutely, Chair Baker, and in fact, that line that says undecided items right on the sheet, so absolutely, yes. There was a reference to there being another amendment, but unless somebody's raising their hand identifying themselves, I figure there's not. And so I'll ask nonpartisan staff, you can just explain the motion. Micheline?
Chair and members, we were contacted this afternoon after amendments started being posted about a technical change that was needed to the A34 amendment. This was the DLI manufactured housing language. This is in your packets, it is the A40 amendment, and it just deletes a few lines and changes the lettering of the paragraphs. This is a technical amendment. I believe you could call on the agency if you wanted further explanation about the details of that.
We can do so. Senator Draheim.
I believe the Senate side did not receive the A40.
Okay, that seems to be a bit of an issue, multiple ways. Ms. Shalene?
Chair and members, perhaps it'd be helpful if it's an extremely simple amendment, I can just read it. So you take out the A34 amendment. This is like an amendment to an amendment. We are modifying the A34, and on page 2 of the A34, delete lines 10 through 16. On line 17, delete paragraph D and insert the C. And then on page 2, line 32, delete the parentheses D and insert parentheses C.
Okay, it looks like the effect is Chair Champion.
I will move that.
Okay. So Chair Champion moves that technical amendment to the A34. So members, the A34, again, deleting lines 2.10 to 2.16, and then making conforming changes regarding,
Yes.
and then conforming changes regarding just the remaining letters of that particular section. Okay, all in favor of approval of that amendment from Chair Champion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So that is an amendment to the A34. Then, Ms. Shalene, what motion should we make to advance, to adopt these policies with the proviso that Chair Baker referenced?
Chair and members, I would recommend moving to adopt the document Working Group Policy Agreement Tracking Sheet, all items, as amended by the A40, and instruct nonpartisan staff to make technical changes as necessary to achieve the will of the committee.
And that is
Chair
my
Champion.
motion,
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. We've adopted 2 spreadsheets. We've adopted all policies. The one remaining item, our leadership has directed us to make some kind of modification to the law relating to non-competes. That law, there's a law currently that prohibits non-compete agreements. Chair Baker, I may look to you. I know that you've been advancing thoughts in this area as to where we can land the plane. Again, we have to come up with something that has the support of a majority of the House, majority of the Senate, directed by leaders to do that. We've done everything else, so we got to get this part done. Chair Baker, turning to you. Oh, Chair Champion.
Before we go to
Please, yeah.
Chair Baker,
Yeah.
and it's my understanding, if we're unable to come to language tonight, then they can continue to work on it, but if they cannot reach an agreement, then it's my understanding, then this provision becomes an issue for the leadership.
I suppose.
Is that your understanding?
Well, I suppose true of everything. Yeah, I know leadership has a heck of a lot going on, and so I think it's certainly, if we can possibly have those of us who it's our responsibility to deal with this, then we certainly do that. It's then, I suppose with everything that we're dealing with at this current point, it could eventually go to leadership, but I would hope with everything else we've done that we can make this happen. Yeah, thank you. Senator Draheim, to you, sir.
Thank you. You know, I'm not familiar with the different options that are being discussed right now on this. It would be nice to share with the complete committee or the working group what the different concepts are, if you will. Thank you.
Certainly, Senator Draheim. I think we maybe, I suspect a couple folks can do that. Chair Champion, you got something to say,
No,
Chair
I was
Champion?
just going to say to Senator Draheim, that is the intent. They're about to go through those, the proposals or the language so that they can have a robust conversation about it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So let's, Chair Baker, you've got, we'll call on you.
Sure. And thank you, members. And again, maybe I could ask the commissioner to come forward. I have a feeling I'll be asking for some questions, maybe from the department's side too as well. In the House, we heard House File 1768. We heard it in my committee. Again, that was prior to the DFL. We had a shared chairing then, so it was when we had full control of it. So I want to make sure that that's on the record, that this was a very good hearing we had. Just, again, understanding it better about the non-compete, the ban in Minnesota that took place in 2023 to kind of ban all non-competes in the state. Again, from a business standpoint, Minnesota's robust economy and the way we are building our economic engine in Minnesota, I think is very important to recognize why and where non-competes are necessary. I think that the movements in 23 and 24 about just completely banning them for all employees for all reasons, I think was misguided, not thought through. I think that we should look at a non-compete that has very careful, thoughtful suggestions about how we don't need to repeal what was done, but to modify them in a way, thank you for passing this out, but to have a discussion about what can still work with getting a lot of the protections that I think that the majority tried to do in the last session to bring up new ideas. There are other states that have a total ban for different reasons, other reasons. A lot of them have wage thresholds like House File 1768 does. Again, I'm happy to answer some questions to this. I have a feeling, Mr. Chair, that this might be an item that, because it's got a lot of complexity, I wasn't sure how in the weeds we want to get into this tonight. I was also looking for some direction outside of this group too, to kind of give us some levity there. But again, as I created this or presented this to different chairs over the last several weeks, not just yesterday. I did present this yesterday again to the chairs 1768 in our labor discussion. I shouldn't say Senator Champion was not there, but Chair McEwen was. And again, just to have this conversation about how important this wage threshold is of $120,559. It would be the second highest in the country. We're trying to make sure that we're really focused on high-tech research development in companies in Minnesota. I know that in our conversations with leadership, including the governor, he knows that this area is important to discuss. And I think for our purposes, we're trying to make sure that we get it right and find the right numbers so that we are not hurting people that want to move around a bit and to do this too. But it's really about making sure that, you know, we're getting it to employees so they don't go to write a direct competitor. It's very specific, and I'd like to just make sure that we have conversations. If we go quite along on this, Mr. Chair and others, I'm happy to just park it, and we can have more conversations offline to get more conversations and details out. But I just know this is a very important item for the House GOP. It was part of our initial desire to get it in here. The House position did not have the right language in the House position that came off the House floor because this was just not agreed to get it on the floor. I think if we recall, members here and to the public, we were kind of getting delayed and getting this to open conference committees back in regular session because that item was also very contentious for us to look for leadership direction at the time, and we really didn't get it except just to take a generic placeholder for this in our current bill. So just, I want to make sure it's clear that the position of the House that's in the current bill is not the position of the House GOP. So that's what I want to make sure is clear to this. And again, I offer other comments, and again, if the commissioner has any thoughts on this, but this is an incredibly important issue for us to address and try to find something that we can get to very close to House File 1768. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and I will note, incredibly important issue, yeah, so good, a really good thing to be talking about. We have a copy of the bill that Chair Baker referenced, and I know he has as well, that as being something that is really sought by House GOP. House File 1768 got copies of that in the back as well. I'll maybe look, I don't know. So yeah, Commissioner, maybe I think we'll maybe wait, and if you're needed, to be called upon. If folks are looking for that, are there comments relating to this? I guess I'll go to Chair McEwen, since this is her area. Go to you first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Chair Baker. I am glad that we are having this discussion now with the public here. Because we've been trying to have this discussion now for a while, and I just want to make sure that the public understands. So we have passed a law in recent years to ban non-compete agreements with overall in general, because it causes a real problem for workers when they become trapped in situations where they're not able to be seeking better employment. It's anti-competitive. We have heard from a number of small businesses also who asked for those changes to say, you know, we'd like to hire people, but they're trapped in these non-compete agreements. And I think we've all heard the horror stories from everyone from workers who work in the restaurant industry to workers who are doctors and surgeons and the like, and experts in those technical fields. So across the spectrum of the economy, there was a strong call for us to make those changes, and we did. We have heard some concerns and a request from certain quarters of the economy for some tweaks and changes. I would note that on the Senate side, we didn't hear much of that at all, and it's reflected that we don't have anything in our Senate Omnibus that addresses non-compete. So there wasn't a lot of talk in our Labor Committee, in the Senate body about the need to act on this right now. I think there was some discussion among some colleagues, but nothing moved forward and was passed into the Labor Omnibus bill. But so what we have in our side-by-sides that and just so the public understands, and when we're looking at, when we come into committee like this, we have our bills, the Senate bill and the House bill, set together side by side so we can compare what did the House do and what did the Senate do, and then decide what we're going to take from the House, what we're going to take from the Senate, and how we're going to address our bill. And what we have is a House bill that addresses and makes some changes to the non-compete law, some pretty substantial changes, actually, to the non-compete law that we passed previously. And what I have heard a lot from you, Chair Baker, is that you're not looking to repeal the law that we passed, but you want to make some modifications, and we're here for that. We're here to have that discussion to find out what those modifications would be. We see this House language, and the only thing that I've heard is that the House language is inadequate. But when I've asked for which parts of it are not and why, I haven't really received an answer on that. So I'm sort of at a loss as to, I waited today to hopefully talk about this, and I never heard from any of I think that this is this is the business partnership who produced the language in the bill that you had passed out, which again is not in our side-by-sides and was not passed off the House floor to go forward for us to consider in this way, but you'd like us to consider this House File 1768. And I've asked previously, and I'm still waiting to hear the answer, what is really the important difference between 1768 and what the House language is? Because what the Senate is being asked to do is to abandon our position, which is we don't want to make changes. We don't have changes in our bill, but we're being asked to meet halfway, which is absolutely reasonable. That's what we're here to do, is compromise. But again and again, when we've come to the table wanting to compromise, we've been shown 1768 and asked to take this bill and sort of said, well, that's it. That's the compromise, and that's not a compromise. This is a totally different bill that proposes more changes to our law and to take away more protective measures than what the House bill does, that is in the House Labor and Jobs and Workforce Omnibus. So I'm just looking for a little bit. I'm looking for something for us to work with. I would love to come to a compromise on this. We have some ideas, and in fact, I just passed out an amendment that we worked on through the course of the day, even though we didn't hear from the business partnership or from your staff or from the Republican delegation from the House on giving us any feedback on the questions that I had. We did put together an amendment in preparation of wanting to work together on this. It's the A132. We've passed it out. We'd like people to take a look at it and consider it. It does represent a lot of things that, again, I would rather not do, but I would like to see some sort of compromise, and I would like for you to consider this as a potential way to move forward.
And I'll just for clarity, members, the House language on this is on page R79 in the bill, so just sort of as what the House brought into conference, just so we're aware of that. I will direct to Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate this language, Chair McEwen. One thing I wanted to come back to, because we did pass language off the House floor. I don't think it was described as a placeholder at the time. It was a negotiated agreement. The non-compete issue held up our budget for 4 weeks before we could pass it, because the GOP wouldn't pass the budget for this language. And I know that the 1764 was the bill that Representative Niska carried. I think it was the bill that was drafted by the business partnership, which is the lobby for the largest employers in the state by their own definition. And so I had some questions. We actually didn't talk about it on the floor, but the negotiated language, a piece of that, and I still think it goes too far, and we can come back to that, because it actually will hurt a significant amount of workers and give control to employers that they don't need to protect their trade secrets, and actually prevents employees from being able to have the freedom to go to another job or start their own company. But before we get there, I want to talk about the differences between the House language and 1763, and I have a few questions about this 1763. Not 8, excuse me, because there is a few changes that were intentionally negotiated and made because of how broad and how undefined 1768 was. So, Mr. Chair, I guess I'd ask Chair Baker, I think he was the one advocating for this, looking at the 1.14 to 1.15, this is the place where it defines the scope of who this applies to. So we say we have a general ban on non-competes, but this is the place where it says, well, in the area of research and development, we are going to carve those folks out who are at 120,000 of compensation, and I'll come back to that. And the way the
Representative Greenman, by the way, you're looking at HF 1768?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking to? Okay, Representative Greenman.
Yep, thank you. And so on lines 1.14, I just ask, so it says research or the creation, analysis, or modification of confidential, proprietary, or trade secret, and I'm wondering what cabins that? What is the definition of confidential and proprietary, and how would that be it's not defined in statute, but I'm wondering what you're thinking about that, because that is one of the main differences.
And you may choose to send to nonpartisan or otherwise, but Chair Baker.
Thank you, Representative Green, for the question. Again, this is extremely technical in nature. I don't know that I can actually give a good answer to this, and I might want to, maybe just, again, this is the first time seeing the amendment idea, and maybe we can look at what this actually means. Again, I'm trying to find out what is in our best interest to get this bill wrapped up. I want to just try to, make sure that we were looking for some outside expertise on this, and I think we were going to try to get it before we came to the meeting. And so again, before I can wrap this up, I'm just maybe asking that we could either take a pause, maybe a short recess, Mr. Chair, to try to kind of get some clarity for us to kind of react to. We want to get this wrapped up too. We are very willing to do this. This is really important to Minnesotans, and I think this is something that we want to get it right. So I want to not misspeak either, Representative Greenman, but I'd like to maybe just suggest that we take a recess to try to keep working on this. There's a few of us that I think want to kind of consult on this, and that'd be my best offer at this point, just to try to, get this technical stuff right so I can answer properly.
And can I just ask Chair Baker, did you have a length of time, like 15 minutes? Or
maybe like 30 to 45 minutes, Mr. Chair. I mean, again, I need to make sure I get some people around here. I know this is running kind of late. I appreciate that, or we can wait, but I want to make sure that we get this right. Or we just abandon the idea and we just let it go to the next.
Yeah, well, let's see. Representative Frazier, you got something to say?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And we did hear this bill, or you did hear this bill in committee. So
We did.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's different. We are asking questions about a bill that was heard in committee. I'm not sure why we would need to recess to discuss a bill that was already heard.
I think actually was voted on and passed in our committee, in fact, during the time when there was was not at a tie. Chair Baker, are you able to talk about how at least the bill that passed? I know this is a bill that you have been very much advancing and saying, hey, this is a thing that we should be adopting.
And again, it was not my bill, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm just asking that we consider recess.
Okay. Well, it's obviously getting late. Folks, I wonder if it's something that we maybe just need to do a bit of consultation, and we could maybe keep it a little bit shorter than the 30 minutes. Would that be?
What would you like, Mr. Chair, 20 minutes?
I mean, if 15, yeah. I guess because I think there's some questions just about the bill that you've been advancing, and I'm sure we can have our staff just explain to us about. This is the one thing that we need to finish up, and I'm sure staff can explain the differences between these things and the amendment advanced by, if in fact Chair McEwen does end up advancing it. Maybe we can take a 15-minute break, Chair Baker, and maybe that would give at least to be able to give a sense to be able to evaluate the amendment and that kind of thing. Representative Frazier.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering if there is someone here in the audience that could testify to help with these technical questions, can we just call them up and allow for testimony?
Well, if there's, if
that would help move things along.
To at least answer questions. I wouldn't, that would not be opening up, just be a question to answer. And if there's somebody who can at least help answer, it's only a couple pages and a couple paragraphs.
Yep.
So it sort of feels like, it's at least answer that.
I'd appreciate 15 minutes or so, Mr. Chair.
15 minutes? Yeah. Why don't we, what I'd like to do is we'll do a recess for 15 minutes, allow Chair Baker time to look at the amendment offered by Chair McEwen, et cetera. Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure, because we have this nice opportunity right now to be sharing some of the things that we have been negotiating and talking about with the public, and it doesn't matter to me if we do this now or if we do it when we come back, but I would very much like to have perhaps staff or to have a walkthrough of my amendment, and so perhaps the public listening in can understand some of what Chair Baker has referred to as some of these technicalities, because there are protections that are enumerated throughout, and they're important. And I want people to understand the differences about the things that we're debating.
Yeah, okay. Well, perhaps, why don't we, if Chair, we'll give Chair Baker some time to think about things and looking for that. And then we can come back and we can look at the differences between these different proposals and hopefully get things wrapped up. So we'll take the working group is in recess for 15 minutes. Call the chair. Thank you. Bringing the meeting back to order. Thanks, everybody, for that. Good conversations. Representative Greenman, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I figured maybe I will just, instead of ask the questions, I will dig in. I actually know quite a bit about this and spent a lot of time with Representative Niska's, the business partnerships bill, and actually spent a lot of time consulting employment lawyers who work on this. And so just want to point out the questions that I had, because it's a hard one. The question I asked about the research and development of the creation, analysis, or modification of confidential, proprietary, or trade secret information is a hard one because the answer is it's not defined. Confidential or proprietary, my understanding is talking to most employment lawyers, a judge would assume is anything an employer marks confidential. So it's not just the whole point of this, as it was presented to me at the beginning of the conversation over a year ago, was the idea here was what we're trying to do is have a narrow carve out for businesses who want to protect their intellectual property, want to protect their trade secrets, want to protect, for lack of a better term, like the secret sauce of both the recipe and how you make it. And if that is the issue, this is the Trojan horse. This language says an employer, for instance, could mark an employee handbook as confidential, and if somebody is doing in HR doing the work to create that handbook, if every email is marked confidential, they are certainly creating, analyzing, or modifying a confidential information. And the fact that it says research and development, which is not defined, or the creation, analysis, or modification of confidential, proprietary, or trade secret information, which is also not defined, is a huge problem, which most employment lawyers said to me essentially means that this $120,000 mark is actually would apply to most people in most companies. And so instead of having a complete ban, or instead of having a ban that only affects a small number of workers, we're talking about carving out people, white-collar workers, but at this point we're talking about a relatively large set of workers who, for the last year and 10 months, have had the economic benefit, the control and freedom to not have a non-compete. Now this would say, in the interest of a very small exception, as it's been sold to me, be a very, very large set of people. The other thing I will say, the other question I was going to ask is about this budgeted compensation of $120,000. Compensation, when I talk to both the department, I talk to lawyers, employment lawyers, is not defined. And so $120,000 salary, which is what we ended up with, salary plus bonus is I think what's in the House position. Salary is where we have been talking, and I believe where the Senate position is, or the Senate amendment is. Salary is something we know. It's something workers know and agree to. Compensation could include health benefits. It could include retirement. It also, when we're talking about some of these workers, could include stock options. What if those stock options are unrealized and they never realize them? Is that part of compensation? That is, to me, a huge concern because, one, we're talking about $120,000, which is too low. But I think beyond that, we're talking about something that this may not be $120,000. It might be you make $80,000 and have $40,000 or $50,000 of compensation. So those are just two of the really, really important, just taking the NISCA or the Business Partnership Bill on its face. The other thing I just want to say, because I think it's really important, we heard a few times, and you have some letters here from both workers who do this work. There's comments that were from the FTC, did an entire rulemaking. 97% of the comments from Minnesota were supportive of a complete ban, a complete federal ban. In Minnesota, we got there first. And this is just a clipping of them. If you go on this QR code, you can read hundreds of stories and comments submitted by Minnesota workers, by Minnesota small businesses in support of banning these restrictive agreements. And one of the things that is concerning to me is that I hear a lot like we should take this offline. I hear a lot we should do this, negotiate this. The reality is that this is on our agenda. This is in the House bill because it is a priority of the business partnership. That is the 100 biggest CEOs and senior executives of the largest Minnesota employers in the state. And the partial repeal is what they want because this is control that employers have. It gives them power to restrict their employees from leaving, from going to a competitor, from starting a small business, not trade secrets. Trade secrets are actually very well protected, and every trade secret lawyer I talk to, there is a thriving business. But what it does is it limits worker mobility. It keeps them from taking that promotion, and so will suppress wages. That's what the Federal Reserve has said. It keeps folks from starting a small business, and that's what the research says, and some of the research is in your packet, that it actually stifles exactly what we say that we want to create, which is incubate small businesses. But if you can't leave the biggest business to go start your own business without taking a year or 2 years off, sidelined, you may not do it. In 2023, we said, let's follow the lead of the states who have no non-competes, the ones, for instance, that are incubating Silicon Valley, the biggest tech companies in the world. If we want to follow that, what we have heard from Silicon Valley is this is actually an asset, not a liability. The reason it's an asset is that those workers, and I heard this, I had a lobbyist come and actually tell me, who's not working on this, at the Indian Chamber of Commerce, they were talking about how there's actually recruiting these workers, these high-tech engineers are coming to Minnesota because they can go from Ecolab to Medtronic or somewhere else. That's a benefit to workers. It's a benefit to our economy. It may not be a benefit to those biggest corporations who can't lock people in, who can't suppress wages by not having to compete with a different offer, but it certainly is a benefit to Minnesota. And our job here is not to represent the biggest businesses behind closed doors. Our job is to represent the economy, the workers, the families in Minnesota. And what we have done in 2023 is done that and said, we will not have these restrictive covenants, and we won't limit the freedom of employees to go where they want to go, to take a job because they don't like their boss, because they get a promotion, because they just want to start out on their own. So we are here with language in front of us that the House passed, which is still way too restrictive, but the House Democrats, DFLers, who 67 of us voted for an amendment to take that language out, said we got to get a labor budget, we got to get a jobs budget, we have to keep the lights on, we have to make sure we're enforcing the labor protections, we are doing the small business growth. We did that. But now we're hearing that that language, which means for white-collar workers who still don't have any power in their giant company, who make $200,000 and $250,000 a year, like, I've never made that much money in my life. But what I do know from some of those folks I talk to is when they're negotiating with their boss at you name the company, they don't have any power either. That's the economy we live in. It is rigged. It is not a level playing field. And so our job is to say, how do we ensure that we have a level playing field for employees? How do we ensure that we have a level playing field for small businesses? How do we ensure that we are serving the economic interests and not the biggest monopoly interests? So what does that look like? To me, that looks like not carving up protections for those workers, for those small businesses. It also looks like doing this in public. The fact that we don't have public testimony from workers and from small businesses is a problem, because what I know is that we have a political problem here, which is this is something that benefits a large, diffuse set of people who may not have lobbyists here sitting here. They're not represented by a trade association. They're not represented by an organization. They're not represented by a labor union. And so they just know it's a good idea. I've gotten a lot of emails about it, but they're not sitting here today. What we do know is that the corporations are very well represented by very good lobbyists who are in all of our conversations. They're in the halls, they're in our negotiations. They wrote this bill, 1768, and they're not the ones who should be negotiating for the people of Minnesota. It is us, and we should be listening to those workers. So what I would say is, one, I am glad we're having this conversation in public. I am glad we are having this conversation amongst us and not behind closed doors. I do think that as we move forward, we should have public testimony, because we should actually hear from the people who are impacted by this, and we should hear from those businesses and corporations too. Because I have asked a lot of questions to those businesses, and I have said, give me one example of your business having somebody leave from one place to another and not being able to protect that with trade secrets, with non-solicitation agreements, with non-disclosure agreements. And it's been a year and 10 months, and I have not heard an answer. But what I do know is this is a very nice tool that employers like to use to control the freedom of their employees, to control and to stifle their competition. And we shouldn't be carving it up without worker voice, and we should be negotiating in public on this. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will save the rest of my comments for the next time we talk about this.
Okay, I do want to keep things moving. I'll go to Chair McEwen for anything she wishes to say. I know you've got your amendment as well, Chair McEwen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate so much hearing from Representative Greenman on this, who has worked on this issue for quite a while and is such an expert on it, and has really does an excellent job about educating people about the details and the complexities that are within the policy, and really just bringing it down to the basics. So I want to make one thing really clear, and that is, and I said this previously, the Senate position is to not act on non-competes at all. We are happy with the law that we have. I have even actually received emails and whatnot from northern Minnesota from workers asking if there's a way we could go back and retroactively make this effective because they have an employer who is still now enforcing an agreement that they were bound under and still are bound under because it went into effect before we passed our law. And they are being prevented from being able to go provide health care in this instance to a reproductive care clinic. So they're trapped. I don't want to go back, and I really, while I am always happy to have discussions about compromise or changes when there are real problems, again, it really does resonate with me, Representative Greenman. I have also had this question. Where's the example? Is there an example? Tell us about a situation that's been a problem and the only problems that I continue to hear from our workers who are still having problems. So I want to make it really crystal clear that the amendment that I passed out, that I had passed out before our break, the A132, is not something I want. What I want is to not make any changes. I believe that the House language that we have before us in our side-by-side comparisons of our omnibus bills is also not acceptable. And I am offering this A132 amendment really as a good faith attempt at some possibility of compromise. And I wonder if we could just have a quick walkthrough of it by staff, just to talk about the different provisions and how they would come down.
Chair McEwen moves the 132. I'll ask staff to give us a quick sense. Again, this is modifying the R79 House provision that came in. Ms. Doyle-Fontaine.
Mr. Chair and members, on the A132, what the amendment would do is in the House position, in the House language, currently there's only one circumstance where a covenant not to compete is valid and enforceable. That's for the sale of a business right now. This would add covenant not to compete is void and valid and enforceable for certain employees. Right now, there's some limitations to that. In the House language, it's only valid, can only be valid for 1 year. This language, or the amendment language on line 1.3, would also add that it needs to be limited to a reasonable geographic area as well as the 1 year limitation. So it's a time and geographic area limitation. Then on line 1.5, I believe there's been some discussion about salary and bonus. So this would delete bonus from the total amount of compensation. And then the threshold in the House position is a $200,000 salary and bonus. This would make it $300 annual budgeted salary, $300,000 annual budgeted salary. Then on line 1.6, the House position has a second group of individuals who can also have a valid and enforceable covenant not to compete, and that is any employee, regardless of the kind of work they do. I'm sorry, I meant to say the first group of people are involved in research and development and trade secrets, which we've already discussed here. So this second group is any type of duty, any employee who makes more than $500,000. The Senate A132 would eliminate that second group of employees. Then from 1.7 to 1.15, it goes in the lines 1.7 to 1.9. Also, the covenant not to compete has to prohibit the employee, only prohibit from a position that's directly related to this trade secret. It can't be any type of other employment. It has to be related to the trade secret information. And then there are additional conditions in order to enforce a covenant to compete would be that it must have been disclosed in the job posting that a non-compete is required. It has to disclose the parameters of the covenant not to compete prior to the employee signing it. And then also the employer would have to pay the employee their full salary for the period of enforcement of the agreement not to compete, which is that 1 year. And that is the A132.
Thank you, Ms. Doyle-Fontaine. Chair McEwen, back to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, the walkthrough. Thanks for that. And I think that these are some really common sense changes that we could make to the existing House language to provide some additional assurances to working Minnesotans that they're going to receive disclosure and adequate notice about a provision like this that they would be being asked to work under if it applied to the employment that they're considering taking. I also think that the threshold for salary does need to be a little bit higher. Representative Greenman said it really well that, you know, I've never also made that kind of money, but in talking to people who do make a salary at that level, depending on the employment situation, oftentimes people also don't have the kind of power to really negotiate and need those protections to come from us. That's what we're here, what our job is. I also think the provision in the amendment to delete "and bonus" is really important because especially if we're comparing it to 1768, but also the House language, the definitions problem is a real issue. Well, someone could receive a salary that is maybe not as high, but with their bonuses, whatever would constitute bonuses, that could put them over the threshold. And whether they, you know, are we talking retirement? Are we talking other benefits, or the value of other benefits that they might be getting that they may not actually realize in income? Anyway, I think getting rid of that "and bonus" is very important, and limitations around the geographic area and the timing also I think are really important. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to request a roll call on this amendment.
There will be one.
Thank you, and
thank you.
That's it.
Any final comments about the A132? Senator Draham.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the discussion. We heard a lot about definitions, and, you know, as someone that has worked in a lot of different industries and a lot of different pay scales based on a lot of different types of compensation, and the proper word is compensation, but I think we could find a definition in either Minnesota revenue or IRS code that would please everybody. I don't think at this late hour, from a person that has to drive an hour and a half yet tonight, we have time to do that. But I think the reasonable geographic area, what is reasonable, depending on the position, depending on the territory. If you ever work with salesmen that have territories, that does get complicated. So I appreciate the A132. I appreciate the 1768, Chair. But I think there's more questions than answers. So I just think we need to keep on moving, and I'll be quiet and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Draham. Any further comments, members? Representative Frazier, briefly, sir, if you can.
I'm going to try to be brief.
Please try to, sir. Please try to, sir.
Just let me say quickly, just to be clear, we did something in 2023 to help workers, help all workers. And, you know, some of the concerns that I think have been raised that this is going to have an impact, businesses are going to leave, it's going to impact our economy, when in fact, when we do things to help workers, and it shows, we are surrounded by states that don't have really strong worker protection laws, but our state does, and our economy does very well. I'm trying to make sure I don't say some things that I shouldn't say. Our economy does very well compared to those states. So helping workers is something that helps create a better economy for everyone. And some of the concerns I've heard are that, and I asked the same question during committee, give us the examples of what's going to happen. And we didn't get that answer. But some of the things that I can tell you from some research that I've done is there are 3 corporations that I'm aware of that are actually expanding their footprint in this state. And specifically, they are expanding their research and development areas. And that is after we've had this law for nearly 2 years. So I am not sure where the examples are going to come from of companies or corporations deciding to leave the state because we have this law in place. Solventum is one of the companies, Sofidel is another, and Philips is the third one that are expanding their footprint in this state after nearly 2 years of having this law in place. I'll leave it with that. My colleagues have done a great job eloquently articulating the persuasive reasons as to why we should keep this law in place, and I'll just say I'll be voting no on the House File 1768 and yes for the amendment offered by Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. And I'll note in the packet of materials folks have, there's an article called Banning Non-Competes is Good for Innovation, talking about the experience in California, Massachusetts, and what a difference banning non-competes has made. I know California, Silicon Valley doing very well. Roll call has been requested. The chair votes no. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Chair McEwen. My goodness gracious. I'm sorry about that. Taking that back. I did not see Chair McEwen back.
I just want to, I want to make sure we're clear on what we're considering, because we just heard a reference to 1768.
Indeed we did, and I think, Chair McEwen, that messed me up. So let's make sure we're very clear. Chair McEwen had made a motion to adopt the A132. That's what we're talking about. That's the amendment before us, and Chair made that mistake. My apologies. And with that, the chair votes aye for the A132.
Chair Pinto, aye. Chair Baker? No. Baker, no. Representative Frazier?
Aye.
Representative Frazier, aye. Representative Greenman?
Aye.
Greenman, aye. Representative Meckland? No. Meckland, no. Representative Zalesnikar?
No.
Zalesnikar, no. Chair Champion?
Aye.
Chair Champion, aye. Chair McEwen?
Aye.
McEwen, aye. Senator Umuver-Baton?
Aye.
Umuver-Baton, aye. Senator Draheim?
No.
Draheim, no. Senator Housechild?
Aye.
Senator Housechild, aye. Senator Mohammed?
Okay, the motion receives a majority in the Senate, but does not receive a majority in the House, and therefore it fails. I believe Representative Frazier, I believe you, I could be wrong about this. Representative Frazier?
I would like to make a motion that we have a roll call vote on the House file language for 1768.
And Ms. Shalene, this would be a motion to adopt, to replace Section 8 of the House bill at page R79 with the language of HF 1768, with staff directed to make any technical corrections. Am I saying that correctly, Ms. Shalene?
Chair, yes, that seems correct.
Okay. Members' comments about that? We've had extensive discussion. Representative Greenman, you want to say something? I'll go to Chair Baker, then Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to make sure that folks are, we've talked a lot about a lot of different versions. What we're voting on is not the House position. It is the original business partnership bill that we heard on the House side. We heard it in committee. The DFL voted against advancing it, so it did not actually advance on its own and was not on the House floor. I just wanted to make sure folks understood, and I know our Senate friends didn't and never saw this language, but we did a long conversation about it. So we're not voting on the House position. We're voting on the original business partnership language. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Going to Chair Baker. Oh, you're passing? Okay. Chair McEwen.
Thank you. Just thank you for bringing this motion to consider 1768. As I've already said, I strongly oppose the adoption of this language. I would ask people to vote no.
Okay, looking to see if there's anything else anybody has. With that, then, Representative Frazier's motion relating to House File 1768. I want to make sure, is there any confusion at all about that motion? Okay, not seeing any. The chair votes no.
Pinto, no. Chair Baker? Baker, aye. Representative Frazier?
No.
Frazier, no. Representative Greenman?
No.
Greenman, no. Representative Meckland?
Yes.
Meckland, aye. Representative Zalesnikar? Aye. Zalesnikar, aye. Chair Champion? No. Champion, no. Chair McEwen?
No.
McEwen, no. Senator Umuver-Baton?
No.
Senator Umuver-Baton, no. Senator Draheim?
Yes.
Draheim, aye. Senator Housechild?
No.
Housechild, no. Senator Mohammed?
Okay, so members, that one fails to receive support in either the House or the Senate, so that motion fails. Looking to see if there's anything else. I'll just note, members, it's my understanding from the budget agreement among our leaders is that non-competes need to be modified with details to be addressed in conference committee. So it's very specific from our leaders that the details have to be addressed in our conference committee. We've established that HF 1768 does not have the support of either the House or the Senate. We've established that A132 has the support of the Senate, but not the House. So I think, members, we're going to need to continue to talk and continue to work together as this conference committee. Our leaders were very clear the details have to be addressed by us. So we've now kind of established some guidelines, I think, about where we stand. So we need to continue to work together and come up with something that can secure the support of both a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. And so let's continue to drive towards that. We've been so productive and effective, and let's make sure to close this one final piece. Looking to see anything from any of the chairs. Again, grateful to everybody for your work, and seeing nothing with that, this meeting is adjourned.